Thank you for the opportunity to join you. It's been a busy few days already and 2 more days to come after today, so thank you very much. I have many slides, and so I will talk about a few things on some of the slides. I'll probably skip over a few slides. Hopefully I won't speak too fast, that the translation will come through okay. So we'll get started. You're coming at a very good time for rare diseases. I don't think I've ever seen so many activities with respect to the rare diseases and orphan products around the world. So it's a tremendous time to be involved with the rare disorders. Okay. For many of us, as we say, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. And what we're seeing is a tremendous transition, although not so good. We have many discoveries from basic and clinical observations that we're trying to translate into treatments that will actually improve our health. We know that drug diagnostic devices, biologicals, the whole development process is very lengthy and very expensive, sometimes taking 13, 14, 15 years and costing upwards of $1 billion, even more, 1.2, 1.4 billion dollars to get a new molecular entity into the marketplace. The clinical trial system, as we currently are observing, is not as efficient as what we would like it to be. We think we can do a better job, and so I think you see a lot of groups now forming networks, consortia, research centers of excellence to try to tie together the many parts that we need to have working together for the development of products for rare disease. And the last part is getting the adoption out into the community of very useful interventions. Sometimes it's many years till the introduction of a new product that it actually penetrates the marketplace and the patients have access to these new treatments. So these are major problems that we're trying to overcome. But we're finding, at least in the United States, more and more people are unhealthier. And the funders of biomedical research, both the public and private sectors, are impatient for new treatments. And with us, our Congress is particularly impatient for the new treatments because they're hearing from the patients and the families and the healthcare providers. So it's a tremendous problem. I'll just mention this briefly. You can see the number of the countries that have had either legislative activities or considerations for rare diseases. And you can see the number has been growing for many years, and it continues to grow. And we encourage all countries to begin to provide a focus on rare diseases and orphan products. So for us in the United States, I'll use us primarily, we estimate close to 6 to 8% of the population have a rare disease, and I think some of the numbers are very similar in Europe. So we're talking probably close to 18 to 25 million people with a rare disorder. And so that 6 to 8% gets to be quite large when you look at the entire family that is involved, the caregivers, the families, and the friends and other relatives who are affected by a rare disorder. In our country, and same with other countries throughout the world, there are various incentives that have been put in place to try to stimulate the development of these products. And so different activities, including the protocol assistance, the study design aspect, marketing exclusivity, research grants for these rare diseases and orphan products, tax credits for clinical trials, and even something called a pediatric priority review voucher. If you're going to be here for the ICOR meetings tomorrow, several of these things will be discussed by Dr. Reese from the Food and Drug Administration, so I encourage you to attend that session. So I just wanted to mention these very important aspects, at least from a manufacturer's point of view, very significant to bring a product to the marketplace. So why is there this increased interest? I think several different points about this. The partnerships and commitments have exceeded the expectations that people ever could conceptualize when we start working on the orphan products and rare diseases. I think those of us who've been familiar with, especially with the patients and the families, we've realized that they are extremely committed and they will do anything to try to find a treatment for their child or their family member. And so their motive is moving that product to improve the quality of life and the care of the patients who have the rare disorders. We found a tremendous growth in interest by the government, research, and regulatory agencies who have responsibility for funding research, along with the pharmaceutical industry, the biopharmaceutical industry, and the medical device industry. This has all caused a tremendous growth in research on rare disorders, and many times the academic researchers are the ones who are given the responsibility of conducting the research. I talked about the expanded role of the patient advocacy groups, extremely strong, and they actually have assumed the role of a research partner resulting in improved patient recruitment into the studies. Plus, we feel that having a patient advocacy group involved very early on, you'll have a much better protocol, a much better idea of how to implement the study. The informed consent document should be a little bit clearer and able to understand much easier. So very, very beneficial. The whole information technology area, the IT area with internet access and digital technology, how that has expanded. Now we're seeing the social media expansion, the crowdsourcing, the blogs, and mobile applications that are just leading to this tremendous interactions among many, many more patients. And we're finding more and more physicians are corresponding with their patients via these media to keep informed of how the disease is progressing and what their response has been to treatment. Certainly the publicity about genetic testing, gene therapy, the benefits of gene therapy, stem cells, and personalized medicine has caused also a greater interest in the part of the public to say there are possible treatments coming. Let us just continue the research that will bring those products to the marketplace. And the last point, the community, especially the biopharmaceutical industry and the investment industry, realize that there are good business models for the development of orphan products. And this has been very important. For many years we didn't have this acceptance, but many of the companies, and I know Genzyme is one of our sponsors, or Sanofi, they really developed a model, and several other companies now are exhibiting the same model. Shire, many of the companies have accepted this, and we find that there's a great deal of interest now in developing orphan products for rare diseases throughout the world. And actually, it has been accompanied by the globalization of the industry. We've seen a globalization of the patient advocacy groups and the academic researchers, the professional organizations. So sort of everything has been coming together very nicely. Okay. And these slides, again, we can spend about an hour or two talking about drug safety research and development. I just put this slide up to show you all the various steps that are required that a compound has to go through to establish the safety of a product. And so many things in chemistry and selecting a product and then testing it, doing your animal pharmacology and toxicology studies, really trying to show that the product is safe. So you can see as things move along, there are a number of studies and a number of years that are required, and this alone takes many, many years, all moving up. So the next stage after we jump out of the preclinical is moving into clinical research and trying to show the safety and efficacy as we move into the clinical trials. And so we're trying to establish this solid foundation that we have a comfort level that if we administer the product, it's going to be relatively safe. No product is really free of adverse events. Something is going to occur. And I think what we've been seeing also with the patients and the family has been a willingness of the families to accept that risk. So we get that risk tolerance has been accepted. The risk benefit is a little bit different now. And the rare disease community has said we would like to have the products and we're willing to take the risk of adverse events, especially if there is no other treatment available and there's a shortened lifespan expected for the, especially for the children, for any of the adults. So you can see there, again, many of the studies that are required, and that's why you can see that it takes 12 to 15 years, 10 years for many of the products. I really feel that for many of the orphan products for the rare diseases, we have found a shortened interval of product development and approval by the regulatory agencies, which has been very beneficial. And part of it is based on the small sample size that's required for many of the individual orphan products. So if we try to translate this into years, and what we're looking at, we'll start with about 10,000 possible compounds. We move up to about 250 compounds that we start going through the first slide that I showed in preclinical work. And we may end up with 5 compounds that will go into clinical trials and end up with one product that is approved. So you can see how long it takes, almost 6.5 years for preclinical, another 6 years or so for clinical research, and then another 1.5 years until we get through the review, and I'll have another slide to talk about how things are speeding up with the review for many of the orphan products, and Dr. Reese will also speak about this. So you can see the length of time that is required, and we haven't even talked about then the phase 4 or post-marketing surveillance of compounds that FDA will approve a product, but yet require that the product be followed for a period of time to really determine the outcome and the side effect experience based on more patients over an extended period of time. So you can see, not very successful if you start with about 10,000 individual compounds and you end up with one that actually gets approved. So, but I think some of those things, some of those ratios we're trying to improve by eliminating products at an earlier stage if we don't make the investment at that point in time. Whoops, let me go back here a little bit. Okay, and these were some of the expedited programs, and I'm not going to spend too much time. Again, hopefully the slide will be available to you after the meeting, and so you can see things that people have been talking about, fast-track review. These are all done at the FDA and in a regulatory perspective. Breakthrough therapies, accelerated approval, and priority reviews. And all of these various programs that have been put into place by different initiatives or different legislation has resulted in quicker reviews and more ready access, faster access to treatments by the FDA approval process. And to get these categories, it's very, very significant for a drug company who's making a product to gain that status to facilitate review. So what we're trying to do is speed up the review process, and so some of these will require that a review be done within 6 months of a new drug, of a new biologic, as opposed to 11 months or 15 months, whatever might be required. So if we can speed it up on the front end, hopefully that will result in then products becoming more readily available. So as I mentioned before, some of the regulatory emphasis that we talked about, and I referred to this, at the regulatory agencies, at least in the United States, and I think in Europe and in other countries as well, the patients and clinical experts now are requested to come in and talk to this regulatory review scientist at FDA to really get a better feel for the disease and an understanding of what's required, what is available or is not available. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands the severity of the disease and the unmet medical needs associated with that individual disease, and they are tremendous. We talked a little bit about the willingness and ability of the patients and the individuals to participate in clinical trials, and it's always has been very, very strong desire on the parts of patients and families to participate in clinical studies, including natural history studies which don't involve treatments but yet expand information about the disease. I also mentioned earlier about the assessment of benefits and risk of therapies. And again, just a tremendous willingness to accept the product and see exactly what the results will be. We in the United States suggest to anybody who's doing a clinical study or clinical trial particularly, talk to the FDA review divisions as early as possible and as often as possible to get clear guidance and commitment from the FDA that they indeed will honor the studies and the results that come in and accept those results that come in the clinical trial. So very important step as we move forward. So I just created this slide to reflect on the problems and opportunities with conducting research on rare diseases. And you can see, because we are involved with patients from multiple countries throughout the world, many of them with very small patient populations, we often have multiple patient advocacy groups that are involved in individual countries throughout the world. Some of them are talking to each other, some are not. And you can see the opportunities that we talk about to bring people together and effect that collaboration. So that's been the goal of many groups, including the ICORD group that is here the next 2 days, and then the NIH-RDRO group that I think Semana may have mentioned yesterday. And we're really trying to consolidate and help people facilitate research. And all of these, they look like they're major problems, and they're not easy to overcome. But I think what you can see is, like, even with multiple research sites, different countries, and you need a number of different investigators. After the product moves forward and you get approval, you now have access to the specialists and the government research and regulatory agencies. And if you're talking to them as you move forward, you're going to have a faster route of development. So this is becoming more and more familiar to everyone, and it's a nice model to work. We've talked about patient registries, and I think I may have a slide or two on that later on. And Dr. Yaffa Rubenstein and Manuel Posada will be talking about registries and others during the ICOR meeting too. And for some of us, we've been trying to move away from multiple institutional review board approval to get one central IRB approval, so that everyone accepts that one approval rather than trying to get, if you have a multi-site study of 25 or 30 different sites, which sometimes you need for rare diseases. If you get approval for one, the others are willing to accept that IRB approval from that organization, and that speeds things up tremendously. So I've used this slide for a number of years, and really we're starting to make progress. The red arrows that you see there, before we really didn't have much going on with respect to patient registries and biospecimen repositories, so that has been changing. The natural history studies, the acceptance of natural history studies, that we follow the course of the disease or condition, regardless if they're receiving treatment or not. But we're really trying to gain a better idea and understanding of the disease itself. And so those red arrows are sort of starting to turn into an amber arrow to, as we say, when you see the red light, you definitely stop. The green light is go. And the amber light or yellow light, go faster, because you gotta get through. Otherwise, that nice picture camera just sort of snaps you and you get a $250 fine. So you want to keep moving on amber very quickly. And moving around the circle, which is sort of really nice, is that you try to identify your clinical endpoints there on the left-hand side and generate the research hypothesis that lead into the clinical trials. And with this, we hope because we started collecting patients way back when, maybe 3-4 years before you even initiate a clinical trial, you now have access to patients who can participate. And so the recruitment, we think, will improve. The interventions then are evaluated, the studies are, after they're conducted, and then we get into what we call the phase 4 post-approval that I mentioned earlier. And again, these are the patients, so now that you're going to follow whenever they're placed on drug. And so we sort of have come full circle. We started with patients and we're ending with patients. We started with a patient registry or a contact registry. We've moved around, we've conducted clinical trials. We're now at post-approval, and you can follow the patients even over a long period of time. So the globalization of activities that we talked about, and And many of these things I referred to about expanding the global collaborative efforts that we see, moving from basic